The wind howled through the valley, rattling the loose shingles on the old house by the willow tree. Elara stood on the porch, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air, her fingers tracing the worn railing. The house was smaller than she remembered, its white paint peeling like shedding skin, exposing the raw wood beneath. She hadn't been back in 6 years, not since the night everything changed. Inside, the air smelled of dust and forgotten things. Elara dropped her duffel bag by the door, her boots echoing on the hardwood floor. The living room was frozen in time. The faded floral couch, the chipped coffee table, the framed photo of her family, her mother and her younger brother Finn, grinning under the willow tree. She avoided looking at it. The memories were too heavy, like stones in her chest. Elara was 28 now, but the house made her feel 22 again, raw and reckless. The girl who'd run away when the weight of her mistakes became too much. She'd left Finn behind, promising to come back for him. She hadn't, not until now. The letter had arrived 3 weeks ago, scrawled in Finn's messy handwriting. "Mum's gone, Elara. Cancer. She didn't want you to know until it was over. I need you. Come home." No accusations, no anger, just those simple words that cut deeper than any blade. Elara had sat on her apartment floor in the city, the letter trembling in her hands, and cried for the first time in years. Now she climbed the creaking stairs to Finn's room. The door was ajar, revealing a chaos of clothes, books, and guitar picks scattered across the floor. Finn, now 18, wasn't there. He'd left a note on the bed. "At the creek. Back later." Elara's heart sank. She'd hoped for a reunion, not another delay. She wandered to her old room, untouched since she'd left. Her sketches still hung on the walls, charcoal drawings of the willow, the creek, her mother's hands. Elara sank onto the bed, the springs groaning under her weight. She pulled a photo from her wallet, one she'd carried through every move, every city. It was her and Finn, ages 16 and 10, laughing as they splashed in the creek. She'd promised him that day, under the willow, that she'd always protect him. She'd failed. Downstairs, the front door slammed. Elara's pulse quickened. She tucked the photo away and descended the stairs, her throat tight. Finn stood in the living room, taller than she remembered, his dark hair falling into his eyes. He wore a flannel shirt, too big for his lanky frame, and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets. "Elara," he said, his voice low, almost a stranger's. "Finn." She stepped forward, arms half raised for a hug, but stopped when she saw his expression, guarded, distant. "I'm so sorry. About Mom, about everything." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Yeah, thanks for coming." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Elara wanted to ask why he hadn't called sooner, why he'd let her find out through a letter, but the words stuck. Instead, she said, "I'm here now, for as long as you need." Then's eyes flickered with something. Hope, maybe? Or doubt? "We'll see," he said, then turned and walked out the back door. Elara stood alone, the house pressing in around her. She'd come back to fix things, to keep her promise. But Finn wasn't the boy she'd left, and she wasn't sure she was strong enough to bridge the gap. The creek behind the house was Elara's sanctuary as a child, a place where she'd escape with Finn to tell stories and skip stones. Now, as she followed the path through the tall grass, the water looked colder, its surface rippling with secrets. Finn sat on a flat rock, tossing pebbles into the current, each one sinking with a soft plonk. Elara approached slowly, her boots crunching on the gravel. "Mind if I join you?" Finn shrugged, not looking up. She sat beside him, the rock cold through her jeans. The willow tree loomed overhead, its branches swaying like a mourner's veil. For a moment they were silent, the creek filling the space between them. "I used to think this place was magic," Elara said, her voice soft. "Like if we wished hard enough, the water would carry our dreams away and make them real." Finn's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You told me once that if I threw in a penny and wished for a dragon, it'd show up. I wasted a lot of pennies." Elara laughed, but it caught in her throat. "I was a terrible sister, making you believe stuff like that." "You weren't terrible," Finn said, his voice barely audible. "You were just gone." The words hit like a punch. Elara stared at the water, her reflection distorted. "I didn't want to leave you, Finn. Things with Mum, they got bad. After the accident, I couldn't stay." The accident, 6 years ago. Elara had been driving, Finn in the passenger seat, when a truck ran a red light. She'd swerved, but not fast enough. Finn's leg was crushed and he'd spent months in recovery. Elara walked away with scratches. The guilt had consumed her and her mother's blame, sharp, unrelenting, had driven her out. She'd left to escape, promising Finn she'd return when she was better. She never did. "You didn't even call," Finn said, his voice breaking. "Not once. I kept waiting, thinking you'd show up, but you didn't. Mum said you were selfish, that you didn't care." I didn't believe her at first. Elara's eyes burned. "I cared, Finn. I cared so much it hurt. I thought you'd be better off without me. I was a mess." "And I wasn't." Finn's voice rose, raw and jagged. "I was 12, Elara. My leg was wrecked, Mum was falling apart, and you were gone. I needed you." "I know," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry." Finn tossed another pebble, harder this time. "Mum never got over it. She'd sit by the window like she was waiting for you. Even when she got sick, she kept your room the same, said you'd come back someday." Elara's chest ached. She hadn't known her mother was sick, hadn't known she'd waited. The letter had been Finn's choice, not their mother's. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Finn looked at her then, his eyes red. "Because I was angry. I wanted you to hurt like I did." The confession hung between them, heavy and sharp. Elara reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "I'm here now," she said. "I want to make it right." Finn stood, brushing dirt from his jeans. "It's not that simple, Elara. You can't just show up and fix everything." He walked away, leaving her by the creek, the water carrying her tears downstream. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. The house creaked like it was alive, each groan a reminder of her failures. She lay in her childhood bed staring at the ceiling, Finn's words echoing in her mind. "I wanted you to hurt like I did." She deserved it, she knew, but it didn't make the pain easier to bear. At dawn, she slipped downstairs, brewing coffee in the old pot her mother used to love. The kitchen was a museum of memories, her mother's chipped mugs, the table where they'd argued, the window where she'd watched Elara drive away. Elara poured a mug and stepped outside, the morning air sharp against her skin. The willow tree stood sentinel in the yard, its branches swaying gently. Elara walked to it, pressing her hand against the rough bark. As a child, she'd believed the tree could hear her secrets, that it held the family's stories in its roots. Now, she whispered to it, "I don't know how to fix this." Footsteps crunched behind her. Finn stood there, holding a mug of his own, his expression softer than yesterday. "You always talked to that tree like it could answer," he said. Elara smiled faintly. "Old habits." "Did I wake you?" "Nah, couldn't sleep." He joined her under the willow, sipping his coffee. "Mum used to sit here, you know, after you left. She'd talk about you like you were still here." Elara's throat tightened. "I didn't know she cared that much. She was so angry when I left." "She was angry because she loved you," Finn said. "She didn't know how to say it. Neither did I." Elara looked at him, his face half lit by the rising sun. "I want to stay, Finn. I want to be your sister again, but I don't know if you'll let me." Finn was quiet for a long time, his eyes on the willow. Finally, he said, "I don't know either, but I'm tired of being angry. Maybe we can try." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Elara nodded, tears brimming. "I'd like that." They stood together, the willow whispering above them as the first rays of sunlight broke through the branches. The morning after their talk under the willow, Elara woke to the smell of pancakes. She followed the scent to the kitchen, where Finn stood at the stove, flipping a slightly burnt flapjack. He looked younger in the morning light, his hair mussed, his movements deliberate but clumsy. "Didn't know you could cook," Elara said, leaning against the doorway. Finn glanced over his shoulder, a half smile tugging at his lips. "Mum taught me, said I'd need to fend for myself someday." The mention of their mother hung between them, but it wasn't as sharp as before. Elara grabbed a plate and they ate in silence, the clink of forks against ceramic the only sound. It wasn't comfortable, but it was progress. After breakfast, Finn disappeared to his room, leaving Elara to wander the house. She found herself in her mother's bedroom, a place she'd avoided since arriving. The room was sparse, the bed neatly made, a single lavender scarf draped over the dresser. Elara's fingers brushed the scarf, her mother's scent, faint lilac and laundry soap, stirring a pang in her chest. She opened the dresser drawer on impulse, expecting old clothes or trinkets. Instead, she found a leather-bound journal, its edges worn, a blue ribbon marking a page. Elara hesitated. Reading it felt like trespassing, but curiosity and a desperate need to understand her mother won out. She sat on the bed, opening to the marked page. The entry was dated a year ago in her mother's precise handwriting. "Elara, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you're coming back. Finn says you're out there, living your life, but I see the way he looks at the road, waiting. I was too hard on you after the accident. I was scared, and I let that fear turn to anger. I pushed you away when I should have held you close. I'm sick now, and I don't have long. I wish I could tell you I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you I'm proud of the woman you've become, even if I don't know her. Keep your promise to Finn, Elara. He needs you more than he'll say." Tears blurred the words. Elara pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. Her mother had been proud of her? The woman who'd screamed, "You ruined everything," after the accident? Elara had carried that blame for years, letting it define her. Now, this journal rewrote the story she'd told herself. She flipped through earlier entries, each one a window into her mother's heart. One described Finn's first guitar lesson, another her mother's fear when Elara left, another her regret for not calling. The final entry, written weeks before her death, read, "I told Finn to write to Elara when I'm gone. I hope she comes home. I hope they find each other again." Elara closed the journal, her hands trembling. She wanted to run to Finn, to show him, but something stopped her. He'd been angry for so long. Would he believe their mother's words, or would they reopen old wounds? She tucked the journal under her arm and went downstairs. Finn was on the porch, strumming his guitar, the notes soft and mournful. Elara sat beside him, the journal in her lap. "Found something," she said, her voice unsteady. "Mum's journal." Finn's fingers stilled on the strings. "What's it say?" Elara opened to the marked page and read aloud, her voice breaking on the words, "I'm proud of you." When she finished, Finn stared at the horizon, his expression unreadable. "She never told me any of that," he said finally. "She just kept going, like nothing was wrong, even when she was dying." "Maybe she didn't know how," Elara said. "She wasn't perfect, Finn. Neither am I." Finn's jaw tightened. "I know, but it's hard to hear she loved you so much when she barely talked about you to me." Elara's heart sank. She'd hoped the journal would bridge the gap, but it seemed to widen it instead. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," Finn cut her off, standing. "I need to clear my head." He grabbed his guitar and headed toward the creek, leaving Elara with the journal and a growing fear that she was losing him again. The town's annual harvest festival was a tradition Elara had loved as a child. String lights, hay rides, and the smell of cider in the air. Finn had mentioned it over dinner the night before, his tone neutral, but Elara caught a flicker of nostalgia in his eyes. "We could go," she'd suggested. To her surprise, he'd nodded. Now, as they walked through the festival, the air buzzing with laughter and music, Elara felt a fragile hope. Finn wore a black hoodie, his hands in his pockets, but he didn't pull away when she nudged his shoulder, pointing out a booth selling apple fritters. "Remember when we snuck 3 of those and got sick?" she said, grinning. Finn's lips twitched. "Yeah. Mum was so mad, but she ended up eating the last one." They laughed, the sound tentative but real. For a moment they were kids again, unbound by grief or guilt, but the moment shattered when a voice called out, "Finn! Elara!" Mrs. Harrow, their old neighbour, approached, her face lined with sympathy. "I heard about your mum. I'm so sorry. And Elara, it's been years. Where have you been?" Elara's smile faltered. "Around. Just needed some time." Mrs. Harrow's eyes softened, but there was a hint of judgment. "Finn's been managing on his own. Tough kid, but it's been hard." Finn stiffened beside her. "I'm fine, Mrs. Harrow." The older woman patted his arm. "Of course, dear, you always are." She moved on, but the air felt heavier now. Elara glanced at Finn, who was staring at the ground. "You okay?" "Everyone in this town looks at me like I'm broken," he muttered, "like I can't handle things without you or Mum." "That's not true," Elara said. "You're stronger than they know." Finn's eyes met hers, sharp and searching. "Then why did you leave me? If I'm so strong, why didn't you trust me to handle it?" Elara's throat tightened. "It wasn't about you, Finn. It was me. I thought I was protecting you by leaving." "Protecting me?" His voice rose, drawing glances from passers-by. "You left me with Mum, who was falling apart, and a leg that barely works some days. I had to figure it all out alone, Elara. You don't get to call that protection." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Elara stood frozen, the festival lights blurring through her tears. She wanted to chase him, to explain, but her feet wouldn't move. The weight of her promise, to protect him, to come back, felt heavier than ever. She wandered to the edge of the festival, where a bonfire crackled. Kids roasted marshmallows, their laughter a stark contrast to the ache in her chest. Elara pulled the journal from her bag, tempted to throw it into the flames, but instead she opened it, reading her mother's words again. "Keep your promise to Finn." "I'm trying," she whispered to the fire. "But I don't know how." Elara didn't see Finn for the rest of the festival. She walked home alone, the journal tucked under her arm, her mind replaying their argument. She'd hurt him again, not by leaving, but by staying and reminding him of everything they'd lost. The house was dark when she arrived, Finn's boots missing from the porch. She knew where he'd gone. Grabbing a flashlight, she headed to the creek, the path familiar even in the dark. The willow tree loomed ahead, its branches silver in the moonlight. Finn sat on the flat rock, his guitar across his lap, strumming a melody that was both haunting and beautiful. Elara paused, not wanting to interrupt. The song was raw, each note carrying a piece of Finn's heart. When he finished, she stepped forward, the flashlight beam dancing on the water. "That was beautiful," she said softly. Finn looked up, startled, then relaxed. "Didn't hear you coming." She sat beside him, the rock cold under her. "You've gotten good. Mum would have loved that." Finn's fingers tightened on the guitar. "I wrote it for her, after she died. Never played it for anyone." Elara's chest ached. "I'm honored then." They sat in silence, the creek's murmur blending with the night. Finally Finn spoke, his voice low. "I didn't mean to snap at you earlier. It's just, everyone acts like I'm still that kid in the hospital bed. I'm not." "I know you're not," Elara said. "You're stronger than I ever was. I left because I couldn't face what I'd done. You stayed and faced everything." Finn shook his head. "I didn't have a choice, and sometimes I hated you for it. But I read the journal after you showed me. Mum's words about you, about me. It made me think, maybe we're both just trying to figure this out." Elara's eyes stung. "Can we figure it out together?" Finn looked at her, his expression softening. "Maybe, but it's gonna take time." "I've got time," Elara said, her voice steady. "I'm not leaving again." Finn nodded, then picked up his guitar. "Want to hear another?" She smiled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yeah, I'd love that." As Finn played, the creek carried the notes downstream, and Elara felt the first stirrings of hope. They weren't healed, not yet, but they were here, together, under the willow's watchful branches. The morning sun filtered through the willow's branches, casting dappled light on the porch where Elara sat, a mug of coffee cooling in her hands. Finn's song from the night before lingered in her mind, its melody a fragile thread connecting them. She had stayed up late, replaying their conversation by the creek. His words, "It's gonna take time," both a promise and a challenge. She was willing to wait, but the fear of failing him again gnawed at her. Finn emerged from the house, his guitar case slung over his shoulder. "Got a lesson in town," he said, his voice lighter than it had been in days. "You want to come?" Elara blinked, surprised. "You sure? I don't want to intrude." He shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. "It's just old man Carter. He'll probably talk your ear off about the 60s. She grinned, setting her mug down. "Sounds like a plan." The walk to town was quiet, the crunch of gravel under their boots blending with the distant hum of cicadas. Elara stole glances at Finn, noting the way he limped slightly, favoring his right leg, the one injured in the accident. She wanted to ask if it still hurt, but the words felt too heavy, too likely to unravel the fragile peace between them. Carter's music shop was a cramped, cluttered space on the edge of town, its windows plastered with faded posters of Woodstock and Johnny Cash. Inside, the air smelled of wood polish and cigarette smoke, and shelves overflowed with vinyl records and second-hand instruments. Old man Carter, a wiry man with a white beard and a tie-dye shirt, greeted Finn with a clap on the shoulder. "Finn, my boy, ready to nail that chord progression?" Carter's eyes landed on Elara, and his bushy brows lifted. "Well, I'll be. Elara Mason, back in the flesh." "Hey, Mr. Carter," Elara said, her cheeks warming. "Been a while." "Too damn long," he said, pulling her into a hug that smelled of patchouli. "Your mama was proud of you, you know. Talked about your sketches all the time." Elara's throat tightened. "I didn't know that." Carter nodded, his eyes kind but piercing. "She was a tough one, your ma. Didn't always say what she felt, but she kept every drawing you sent her." Finn shifted beside her, his expression unreadable. Elara wanted to ask more, but Carter clapped his hands. "Right, let's make some music. Elara, you sit. Finn's got a new piece to show me." Elara settled on a stool, watching as Finn tuned his guitar. He played the same haunting melody from the creek, but this time it was polished, the notes weaving a story of loss and longing. Carter nodded along, occasionally offering pointers, but Elara barely heard them. She was lost in Finn's music, in the way his fingers moved with a confidence she hadn't seen in him before. When the lesson ended, Carter pulled Elara aside while Finn packed up. "You sticking around this time?" he asked, his voice low. "I'm trying," she said. "For Finn? Good." Carter's gaze softened. "He's a tough kid, but he's carried a lot." "That accident, it wasn't just his leg that got hurt." Elara's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Carter hesitated, glancing at Finn, who was out of earshot. "Your mama told me something a while back. The police report from the accident, it wasn't just the truck driver's fault. The brakes on your car were shot. Your ma knew they needed fixing, but couldn't afford it. She blamed herself as much as she blamed you." Elara's breath caught. "She never told me." "She didn't want you to know," Carter said. "Thought it'd make things worse. But I figure you deserve the truth. You've been carrying that guilt alone too long." Elara's knees felt weak. All these years, she'd believed the accident was her fault. If she'd swerved faster, reacted better, Finn wouldn't have been hurt. But the brakes? That changed everything. Her mother's silence, her anger, it wasn't just about Elara's mistake. It was about her own. "You okay?" Finn's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood by the door, guitar case in hand, his brow furrowed. "Yeah," Elara lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." They walked home in silence, the weight of Carter's words pressing on Elara's chest. She wanted to tell Finn to share the truth, but fear stopped her. Would it help him, or would it tarnish their mother's memory? She needed time to process, to decide. Back at the house, Finn set his guitar down and turned to her. "You were quiet today. Everything all right?" Elara hesitated, then nodded. "Just glad I got to hear you play." "You're really good, Finn." He ducked his head, a shy smile breaking through. "Thanks. Carter says I could play at the Harvest Festival next year, maybe write some more songs." "You should," Elara said, her voice earnest. "Mom would have loved that." Finn's smile faded slightly, but he didn't pull away. "Yeah, maybe." That night, Elara sat on her bed, her mother's journal open in her lap. She hadn't read it since showing Finn, but now she flipped to a new entry, dated a month after the accident. "I took the car to the shop today. They said the brakes were worn out long before the crash. I should have fixed them, but money was tight, and I thought we'd be fine. Elara blames herself, and I let her. I'm a coward. Finn's in pain, and I can't look at her without seeing my own failure. God, I wish I could take it back." Elara's tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink. Her mother had carried the same guilt, the same weight, and never said a word. Elara closed the journal, her resolve hardening. She had to tell Finn, not to hurt him, but to free them both from the silence that had kept them apart. Tomorrow, she'd find the words. Tomorrow, she'd keep her promise.